2017, an insightful questionnaire with confessions completed by playwright Oscar Wilde in 1877 on the cusp of finding fame sold for over £47,000 in Sotheby's sale from the collection of acclaimed actor Steven Berkoff. Wilde was in his early 20s when he contributed to the album of mental photographs in 1877. This was a popular hobby, continued throughout the Edwardian era, and the Llewellyn Davies boys, as muses for Peter Pan, completed surveys like this as well. You can learn more about the Llewellyn Davies boys on this channel. Wilde was 22 or 23 years old, still at Oxford, and yet to publish a book in 1877, but had already established a keen aesthetic following, not least for his quips and personal fashion. Signed grandiosely with his full name, Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde, here he answers 39 personal questions, recording a myriad of different preferences from his favorite color, flower, season, tree, and perfume to gems, first names, painters, musicians, poets, and more. Let's dive in. Wilde's confessions include favorite tree, stone pine, and lemon tree. Potentially inspired by Wilde's proficiency in classics and the prevalence of lemon trees among ancient Greece and Rome. The stone pine tree is native to the Mediterranean region, occurring in southern Europe, occupied Palestine, and the Levant. Favorite flower, Lilium arboricola, but the handwriting is hard to read. Different from the Jersey lily, popularized by Wilde's muse Lily Langtry, the Lilium arboricola is green. Perhaps reflecting his Irish roots, Wilde chose the green flower for these confessions instead of the sunflower, which he wore in his lapel. The sunflower, tall and bright, became the Wilde parody symbol in the press. The Lilium arboricola is a British lily, collected by Kentish horticulturalists for decades. So we see the start of this trend, the British versus Irish influences, on Wilde. As Wilde grew older, it seems he ascribed more towards his Irish roots, which you can explore in his friendship with Yeats video on this channel. What is your favorite object in nature? The sea, when there are no bathing machines. Hour in the day, past hour. Season of the year, autumn. Musicians, Mozart, Chopin. Perfume, almond. Piece of scripture, apoxamenos of the Vatican. The term apoxamenos comes from the Greek verb meaning to clean oneself. Ancient Greek athletes used to scrape off the oils used to anoint the body before competitions with sand and a sort of spoon called the sturgill. As a scraper, this piece of scripture was an early Greek copy of the entire Bible. During his imprisonment from 1895 to 1897, Wilde came to regret his sins, writing 3 years before his death De Profundis, an extended treatise including his conversion and identification with Jesus Christ, among other topics. Upon his release, he told a journalist, "I intend to be received into the Catholic Church before long." His spiritual renewal led him, writing to the Society of Jesus, to request a 6-month retreat. When his request was denied, he wept. Spending the next 3 years impoverished in exile in France, he contracted meningitis on November 25, 1900. When his lifelong friend Robbie Ross appeared, Ross sent for a priest. On his deathbed, Wilde was conditionally baptized into the Catholic Church by Father Cuthbert Dunn, a Passionist priest from Dublin, as Wilde was baptized as a child. Dunn recorded the baptism. As the voiture rolled through the dark streets that wintry night, the sad story of Oscar Wilde was in part repeated to me. Robert Ross knelt by the bedside, assisting me as best he could while I administered conditional baptism, and afterwards answering the responses while I gave extreme unction to the prostrate man and recited the prayers for the dying. As the man was in a semi-comatose condition, I did not venture to administer the Holy Viaticum. Still, I must add that he could be roused, and was roused from this state in my presence. When roused, he gave signs of being inwardly conscious. Indeed, I was fully satisfied that he understood me when told that I was about to receive him into the Catholic Church and gave him the last sacraments. And when I repeated close to his ear the holy names, the acts of contrition, faith, hope, and charity, with acts of humble resignation to the will of God, he tried all through to say the words after me. So even at the time of his death, Wilde remembered the spiritual words he had murmured as a child in Dublin. The Wilde deathbed photo is very interesting, as it looks like Wilde is either covered in ferns on his white shirt or his torso has been cut out of the photo. Some eyewitnesses insisted Wilde exploded with bile upon his death. What do you think? Book to take up for an hour. I never take up books for an hour. Authors: Plato and John Ruskin. Ruskin was one of Wilde's tutors. Character and romance: Achilles. What a long-sighted answer for Wilde, whose love of beauty and the beautiful boys of London and Lord Alfred Douglas would be his Achilles heel. You can learn more about this in the Cleveland Street Scandal video on this channel. Blank of history. Alexander of history. Which era would you choose to live in? Italian Renaissance. Where would you like to live? Florence and Rome. Wilde spent time in both of these cities in his life on his grand tour. What is your favorite amusement? Writing sonnets and reading. What is your favorite occupation? Reading my own sonnets. If not yourself, who would you rather be? A cardinal of the Catholic Church. Gem: sapphire in winter, diamond in summer. The sapphire was a very popular Victorian gemstone, due not least to Queen Victoria's sapphire coronet she was painted repeatedly in. Wilde would later wear emerald rings, green for Ireland, one of which cracked, and he moved it from hand to hand as he considered it his unlucky stone. Names: male and female. Eucharis, Florence, Cecil. Wilde's sons were to be named Vivian and Cyril, close to Cecil. What trait of character do you admire most in a man? The power of attracting friends. What trait of character do you admire most in a woman? The power of becoming either a Cleopatra or a Saint Catherine. To learn more about Lily Langtry and Sarah Bernhardt, arguably two of Oscar Wilde's Cleopatras, you can check out their videos on this channel. What trait of character do you most detest in each? Vanity, self-esteem, conceitedness. What are the sweetest words in the world? Well done. What are the saddest words? Failure. Favorite poets: Sappho and Lady Wilde. Lady Wilde was Oscar's Irish nationalist mother, which is very sweet to see here as an answer. It is interesting that he never mentioned his father, who was also a writer and compiled a collection of Irish myths, which you can still read today. Favorite poet: Keats and myself. What is your idea of happiness? Absolute power over men's minds, with minds underlined. What is your bête noire? Irish potato tart. What is your dream? Getting my hair cut. What is your favorite game? Snipe. What do you believe to be your defining characteristic? Self-esteem. If married, what do you believe to be the defining characteristic of your better half? Devotion to her husband. Wilde left more space in this answer but never filled it out. He did marry a very devoted woman, Constance Lloyd, in 1884, 6 years after this questionnaire. Constance was devoted to her husband and visited him in jail at least twice. But he refused to give up his lifestyle, and Constance subsequently changed her last name and the name of their sons to Holland. What is the sublimest position human nature can hope to ascribe? Aestheticism. So we see the aesthetic movement moving through Wilde's life, although now he is one of the foremost figures of it. During Wilde's undergraduate years, the pre-Raphaelite painters and John Ruskin filled that role. What is your motto? Left blank. Painters: the Angelico, Turner, Correggio. Turner was a very British romantic painter and friends with Wilde's tutor Ruskin. Which book would you part with last? My Euripides. This album, including the Oscar Wilde questionnaire, came to sale from the collection of actor and director Steven Berkoff, famed for his villainous on-screen roles, including General Orloff in the 1983 James Bond movie. Berkoff began collecting Oscar Wilde material around the time he directed Wilde's great tragedy, Salome, in the late 1980s. Salome, illustrated by Aubrey Birdsley, whom you can learn about on this channel, incorporated parts of Wilde. Some scholarship indicates Wilde dressed up in drag to play the female part himself. So Berkoff ostensibly dove into Wilde documentation to get a better sense of the play. His 1980s show opened to acclaim at the Gate Theatre Dublin on the 60th anniversary of Salome's first controversial public viewing there in 1928, and went on to sell out at London's National Theatre before traveling to Japan, Germany, and beyond. You can catch a 1990s version of it on YouTube today. This provenance perfectly mirrors another former owner of the album, Adderley Millar Howard, who was born around 1863 and died in 1927. Howard was also an actor, a touring theatrical impresario, and later theatrical manager. Berkoff bought the album from the Howard family, who held on to it for generations. Howard is believed to be an early or perhaps even the first owner of this album. His obituary in The Stage on October 13, 1927, notes that he had a long and varied career on the stage, extending over more than 40 years. If Adderley Howard was the original owner of this album, he would have been about 14 when he collected Wilde's entry. This seems unlikely, since Wilde was not socializing with telegraph boys and young actors as early as 1877. If he was, this punches a huge hole into his love for a woman, Constance Lloyd, whom he would marry. Could the survey have been given to Howard as a gift? The Stage notes, Howard left home while still in his teens to join a profession in which he had neither friends nor influence. When an auction was held of Wilde's household goods to raise money for the prisoner, including his children's toys and their rabbit hutch, sadly enough, it was not policed, and more than half of the lots were stolen after the first open house. So it's not impossible that Howard, with so few friends in the theater who might have gave him this book, stole the leather-bound book later in life. Sotheby's Dr. Philip Errington said, Wilde's responses sparkle with the author's characteristic ebullience, and many are perfect Wildean epigrams. Knowing what we do about Wilde's sharp wit and lofty worldview, his replies are exactly what one would expect to see from this bold, intellectual young writer, still in his early 20s but already experiencing his first taste of fame. This questionnaire, likely filled in for an admiring fan, freezes the young Oscar in a moment of time, but also provides a chilling prophecy of what was to come. His answer to the final question, what is your aim in life, reads fame or even notoriety. The album carried a pre-sale estimate of up to £60,000. Regarding the gemstones, almost 2 decades after it was stolen from college, a gold ring gifted by Wilde to his close friend William Ward made its way back to Magdalen College, Oxford. The 18-karat gold band, which is shaped like a belt and buckle, was taken by a cleaner the day after the May morning celebrations in 2002. Following initial investigations, the college feared the ring had been melted down and would never be seen again. The vast majority of London is now ethnic non-British, and so would likely not care about a pawned Oscar Wilde ring and melt it down for the gold. We thought it had disappeared, said Magdalen president Professor Sir David Clary, so I was delighted when we heard it had been found. The ring was found by Arthur Brand, a Dutch expert in art recovery, with the help of a commodity broker, George Crump. The friendship ring was given as a joint gift to William Ward in 1876 by Wilde and another friend, Reginald Harding. On the outside, it bears an inscription in Greek, which reads, "Gift of love to one who wishes love," and on the inside, the initials of Oscar, Reginald, and William. Oscar mentioned the ring to William in a letter held in the college archive. He wrote, "I am so glad that your people liked the ring, and if the Greek lines you quoted to me would fit it, would be charming. Perhaps, however, our initials inside and Greek inscription outside would be all that would fit conveniently." The ring was donated to college originally at the end of the 19th century, along with letters written by William Ward, and is now back at the Magdalen, and a great example of some Wilde jewelry you can see for yourself.